James, continuing my reading of James. Now, many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For all of us make many mistakes. Anyone who makes no mistakes in speaking is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check with a bridle. If we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships. Though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body, sets on fire the cycle of nature, and is itself set on fire by hell. For every species of beast and bird, of reptile or sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species, but no one can tame the tongue. A restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it, we bless the Lord and Abba Father, and with it, we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salty water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, yield olives? Or a grapevine figs? No more can salt water yield fresh. Thus ends the reading of the word. You know, I picked out the title Blazing Tongues because my parents' favorite movie was Blazing Saddles. So I thought, Blazing Tongues, let's go with that. Woohoo! There are people that are going to think I'm going to go in a certain direction with this sermon. And I have to say that James, he's quite a philosopher. I want you to know. This is a man who is very highly educated. There are those who say that James was the brother of our Lord, but he is likely, as scholars say, not the son of a carpenter. He's so highly educated, and he follows the organized thought of a Hellenist, of someone who has studied the philosophers, the Greek philosophers. So the way he builds his argument, perfect example for today, the way he builds this argument and takes us on a journey is extremely poetic and very, very descriptive. His metaphors are exciting. How many of you sail boats? Okay, well. Be all right. How many of you have ever ridden a horse? And depended upon that bit in the horse's mouth to rein the horse one way or another, to stop him, to get him to turn left, to get him to turn right, knowing that this horse weighs a ton, and you don't. That bit, that little bit, that piece of metal in that horse's mouth is going to help you get him to go where you need him to go and hopefully stop it so you don't fall and break your neck. The rudder on a sailboat or on any ship, even on an airplane, is a small piece that goes back and forth. If you're sailing a boat, it can be a pretty good sized boat, and this rudder, the helmsman just takes the rudder, wonderful metaphors here of something that is so small that can do such a powerful, controlling thing. He lifts up then the human tongue as being something so small, one of the smallest parts of the human body, yet it is so powerful. It is so incredibly powerful, and it can do incredible damage. And he compares it to a small blaze, little teeny tiny blaze. Remember Smokey the Bear? Little teeny tiny blaze in the forest that becomes a conflagration. That is a huge, roaring, destructive forest fire. And James compares the human tongue to this forest starting, forest blazing, fire starter, because of its power to do damage. The tongue is capable of blessing and cursing. The human tongue is able to speak out of both sides of its mouth. The human tongue can be divided. It can go one way and it can go the other. Now, I know you thought I was going to talk about gossip, but I'll just define the word for you, because I'm not going to talk about gossip today so much as I'm going to talk about something else. But I do want you to know that the word gossip comes from the combination of two words, God and sibling. God-sib. And it originally meant, in the 5th century, it originally meant a relative of God. God-sib was a relative of God. And it gradually evolved, and it came to mean somebody who was a very close acquaintance, a good friend, particularly women who were invited to attend the birth of a new baby. And then eventually it devolved, I'll say, into idle talk. And then it devolved into idle talk and groundless rumor. And God's relative, which really meant God-parent, evolved into something horrendous. Gossip was something that had something to do with God a long, long time ago. But it devolved. The fiery, blazing tongue that James talks about is a tongue that is full of emotion. It is a tongue that is speaking from a place of, shall we say, a place that requires notice. In the Mark passage that we read today, the disciples of Jesus were arguing with one another over who was the most important among them, who was the first among them. And they argued with each other because each one was wrangling for position, either at the head of the line or wrangling for position right next to Jesus, because they had a requirement to feel important. They had a requirement to feel that they had some worth. Somehow, they weren't feeling very worthy. They didn't have any self-esteem for some reason. They didn't believe perhaps in what it was they were doing in the company of Jesus. The reason that we talk with blazing tongues may very well come from a place of defensiveness. It may very well come from a place of envy. It may very well come from a place of needing to feel important. I think that's what James was trying to say. You Christians need to live differently. Remember he said last week, he said, faith without works is dead. He said, if you talk about believing in Jesus, but you don't demonstrate your belief in Jesus, you don't work for it, you don't show it with your hands, and how you work with your body and how you are with people, then it means nothing. He's saying today, your mouth has everything to do with your Christianity. How you speak in the world has everything to do with your Christianity. If you speak fresh water, that's nice. You can't speak salt water at the same time. How many of you have animals? You know a lot about canines and felines? You know they're both pretty territorial. Did you know? I mean, dogs are territorial, just like cats, just in a different way, okay? Dogs, when they go out into the world, mark the territory so that they don't get lost, and so when they come back around, they know where they've been, and they know how to get back home. Cats are territorial, and because they don't want anybody crossing their borders, I have a window in my house that is a full-length window right next to my front door. And when the cat from across the street dares to come into my yard, my cat Ramona is there at the glass right. She can't get anywhere because there's this glass in the window. But she's upset that this person, this other cat, has come onto her territory. She's territorial. Now, Ramona and I have lived together for 7 years, and I know her pretty well. Very talkative cat. Meowing a lot. And this morning she was meowing as I was desperately trying to write the sermon. And she was there with her paws. You know, she puts her paws up, reaches up on the chair, and goes meow, which means pat my head. So I scratched her head, you know, and then I went back to typing, and she got back up again, and meow. So I scratched her head. She did that 3 times, and she's now down on the floor, sitting on my Bible, saying meow. So I reached down and I scratched her head, and I didn't do it the right way. I know. When you don't do it the right way, you get scratched and you bleed. I know Ramona really well. Now, Ramona also lives with Chiquita and Sunny. Now, Chiquita is a black lab who is about 10 times Ramona. She's 10 Ramonas. And Chiquita is blind from birth. Chiquita can't see. So if Ramona sneaks up on her, you'll hear this, and you'll hear Chiquita taking off after Ramona until she hits a wall. Sunny is a 90-pound yellow lab who loves to tease Ramona. And Ramona can be seen standing straight up and going, pow-wow, to Sunny right on his nose to back him off if he drives her crazy. Church people can be territorial too. We have a tendency to want to guard our territory. What's important? Who's more important than everybody else? Is the Finance Committee, because the Finance Committee is in charge of making sure we stick with our budgetary priorities. Is the Finance Committee the most important? Is the Staff Parish Relations Committee, which is the human resources arm of the church, the most important committee? Is the trustees of the church the most important committee? They are the people who have the legal requirements of the church, and they have to keep the physical plant in shape. And then there's the Administrative Council, which is made up of all of the team leaders and all of the committee chairs and a whole bunch of other people, and they're like the board of directors of the church, and they are the ones responsible for trying to share the vision of the church and the mission of the church with everybody who visits here and attends here. Or is it the teams? teams important? Is it the worship team that sees to it that this worship experience is organized, that when you come into this sanctuary, you are welcomed wholeheartedly. You are given a guide to be able to worship. If you need to know where something is, the whole worship team is there to make sure that you get what you need. Are they more important than the others? Or the mission team? The mission team that is out there doing feeding programs in the community, at the Coachella Valley Rescue Mission and up at Joshua Tree and doing Roy's Lunch here? Or is it the social justice team that is doing the Just Pancakes breakfast and who is seeing to it that we participate in the Pride Parade? Is it the hospitality team that is just beginning to pull itself into that place of being the pastoral calling ministry of this church? Or is it Rachel's email ministry that's the most important? Is it Jean Smoot's prayer shawl ministry group that's the most important? Who is the most important? Is it the discipleship team who is struggling and working hard to try to lift up the programs for our children, to educate them so they know what it means to be followers of Jesus Christ? Is it the DMA? Is it the music ministry? Is it the choir ministry? Is it the bells? Who's the most important? We give territory because we believe our ministry is important. And we have to be careful not to hurt one another's feelings over our own self-importance. We have to be very, very careful not to decide that my work is more important than your work. So here's my solution for the blazing tongues that happen all the time, and I apologize for my blazing tongue. The solution for blazing tongues is how you hear them. Christians hear differently. Christians are instructed to speak differently, but Christians also hear differently. And when somebody's blazing tongue comes at you as a Christian, you are called to hear that differently. You don't hear it with a defensive heart. You don't hear it with a self-conscious heart. You don't hear it as an insult. You don't hear it as painful. You don't hear it as a weapon. You, as a Christian, must hear differently. You must not see that as a blazing flame. You must know that the person who is speaking is that person who is also made in the image of God. And whether you receive what they say as blessing or curse has everything to do with where we will go from there. I think James is blaming the tongue for a lot. And I think the tongue can be blamed for a lot because God knows we put our feet in our mouth all the time. But we as Christians have the ability to do some work with our ears. We have the ability to solve the problem by hearing in a new way. So I invite you to not only engage or work with your tongue, douse it, with communion wine, but also use your ears. Couple your tongue and your ears. Be careful, yes, what you say to each other. Be careful how you speak to each other. Don't decide that what you do is more important than what someone else does, please. But hear one another as well as you can, graciously and gracefully, patiently.